Ever scrolled past one of those AI summaries of a news article? Or maybe even used one to get like the gist of a really long piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know those tools I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They seem to just devour all this information and then like spit out the key points.
Right.
Well, how they're getting that information is causing a major legal battle, and the New York Times is right at the heart of it.
Yeah.
They sent a cease and desist letter to Perplexity.
Mm,
That's the AI company behind a lot of those summaries you've probably seen.
that's right. The New York Times is saying Perplexity used their content and they didn't give them permission to use it to train their AI.
And this isn't even the first time they've done something like this, right?
No, not an isolated incident at all. They're already suing OpenAI, too,
Well, wow.
the creators of ChatGPT, for similar reasons.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out, like, what are the rules of this whole AI learning game?
Yeah.
And the New York Times is like, we're not playing around here.
Right.
Especially because, and this is where I think it gets even more interesting, Perplexity's AI can even summarize the articles that are behind a paywall.
Yes.
The ones you usually need a subscription to actually be able to read.
Right.
So does that change things from a legal standpoint?
Absolutely. It adds a whole other layer to it. See, accessing paywalled content without permission, that's not just a potential copyright issue.
Yeah.
It might actually violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, too.
Whoa, hold on. The CFAA.
The CSAA.
I feel like most people don't even realize that that applies to like digital cases like this.
Right.
So it's not even just about if an AI can access this information.
Right.
It's should it be able to
Exactly.
legally and ethically.
It's a sticky situation.
Yeah.
It really is. And to be fair to Perplexity, they do have that ad revenue sharing program in place.
Right.
It's like they're trying to find a way to work with publishers
Yeah.
and make sure that they're compensated.
Right. So they're at least acknowledging the value of the content that they're using.
Yes.
But even with that, there's still the question of, is that enough to address all of these legal concerns?
Right.
Especially this whole copyright infringement thing.
Exactly.
And this is where fair use comes into play, right?
Yes.
Isn't there some kind of legal precedent that allows the use of copyrighted material,
Yeah.
but only in certain situations?
You're right to bring that up. Fair use. That is a cornerstone of copyright law.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often what these AI companies rely on as a defense.
Okay.
However, it's not a simple yes or no answer. There's a 4-factor test that courts use to determine fair use, and each one has to be carefully considered.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because I think this is where it's easy to get lost in all the legal jargon. What are those 4 factors?
Okay.
And how do they apply to, like, AI using copyrighted material?
So the first factor looks at the purpose and character of how that material is being used.
Okay.
It asks, is this transformative?
Okay.
In other words, is it adding new meaning or understanding to the original? Or is it just a straight copy?
Right.
Summarization can be tricky here. It can be transformative if it's offering a new perspective. But for Perplexity, the fact that their work is commercial makes it less likely to be fair use.
So let me see if I understand this. So if I, as an individual, were to, like, summarize an article for my own personal use,
Right.
let's say to study for an exam,
Mm-hmm.
that's different from a company like Perplexity using that summary to make money.
Exactly. The context and the purpose of the use are critical in determining fair use.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the second factor?
That one looks at the nature of the work that's being copyrighted.
Right.
Creative works, like the articles that the New York Times publishes, usually have much stronger copyright protection than, let's say, purely factual data.
Okay.
Think of it this way. You'd want to safeguard that creative effort that goes into making a piece of writing.
Right. So a poem would have stronger copyright protection than, like, a list of historical dates.
Precisely. It's about protecting that unique expression and originality in the work. Now, the third factor that focuses on how much of the original work is being used.
Okay.
Even if a use is considered transformative, copying large amounts of the work makes that argument for fair use much weaker.
So it's not even just about, like, a sentence here or there.
Right.
It's about the overall volume,
Exactly.
even if it's being, like, summarized or represented in a different way.
You got it. And that takes us to the fourth factor, and it's often the most important one in these cases involving AI.
Okay.
The effect of whatever they're doing on the potential market for the copyrighted work.
And this, I'm guessing, is where the New York Times' subscription model comes into play.
Right on. The question is, if people can get the main points of an article from an AI,
Yeah.
are they still going to pay for the New York Times?
Right.
If Perplexity summaries are seen as a replacement for the original articles, that could directly hurt how much money the New York Times is making,
Right.
which would make fair use much harder to argue.
So even if Perplexity says that their AI summaries are transformative, the fact that their product could hurt the New York Times' profits could really weaken their case.
You got it.
Yeah.
And this is where things get even more complicated.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the law, but about ethics, too. We'll get into that more after a quick break.
It's almost like Perplexity is walking this really weird tightrope.
Yeah.
They're trying to create something new and like provide a valuable service
Right.
by like summarizing all this information.
Yeah.
But they might also be stepping on the toes of the people who like created it in the first place.
Yeah, it's a classic case of, disruption versus tradition.
Right.
And it really highlights the ethical side of AI, too.
Right.
The New York Times is saying Perplexity is engaging in unjust enrichment.
Hold on. Unjust enrichment. Is that like a legal term?
It is a legal term. It's not as exciting as it sounds, though.
Yeah.
It basically means that one person is making money off of the work of someone else without giving them a fair share.
Okay, so like if you imagine some kind of AI that goes around and scrapes a bunch of recipes from food blogs
Right.
and then uses them to make like a super cookbook and then sells it for a profit.
That's unjust enrichment. Yeah, because that AI company is benefiting from all those bloggers' hard work.
Right.
But they're not giving anything back. In this case, the New York Times is saying that Perplexity is building a business off the backs of journalists.
Right.
Like people who actually write the article.
Okay, yeah, that analogy really makes it hit home.
Yeah.
You create all this great content,
Right.
and then someone else comes in with an AI, repackages it, and then they're the ones who are making all the money from it.
Exactly. And that's why this case has such huge implications for journalists.
Right.
Because if they can't protect what they create
Right.
and be compensated for it, how can they stay in business?
Exactly.
Subscription fees, ad revenue, it all depends on people reading their articles.
Right.
And if AI tools are pulling people away from that, it really hurts the whole industry.
It makes you think, are we headed to a world where all information is just free?
Yeah.
Like it's summarized by AIs and repackaged, but it's at the expense of all the writers and journalists who created it.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, what happens to in-depth reporting?
Right.
What happens to like really amazing journalism if there's no money in it anymore?
Exactly. And this isn't about being anti-AI.
Right.
It's not about stopping progress.
Right.
It's about making sure that AI helps everyone.
Right.
And that it's fair to the people who are creating the content in the first place.
So how do we do that?
Right. So what are some ways that these companies can use all this data without getting into legal trouble or causing all these ethical issues?
Exactly.
Well, one thing we already talked about is licensing agreements.
Right.
They could just pay publishers for permission
Okay.
to use their content.
So it's kind of like subscribing to a service,
Exactly.
but for AI companies.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Transparency is really important, too.
Okay.
Right now, you read an AI summary and you don't even know where it came from.
Right.
Imagine if every time you saw one, it had a link to the original article.
Okay. So like a footnote.
Exactly. Giving credit where credit is due.
Right.
And then some people are saying that AI needs to go beyond just summarizing.
Okay.
What if it could analyze things?
Okay.
Or criticize, or come up with completely new stuff.
Right.
Based on what it's learned.
So instead of just being a really good student, the AI becomes like a scholar in its own right.
Yes, exactly.
Like it's creating something new.
Right.
Adding its own unique analysis.
It's like sampling in music. It used to be a legal gray area.
Yeah.
Borrowing from existing songs.
Yeah.
But now you have whole genres like hip hop that are based on it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So could AI do the same thing for writing and information?
So instead of just being a really good student, it's more like the AI becomes a scholar.
Exactly. And that brings up a whole bunch of other questions. Like if an AI actually does create something totally new,
Yeah.
based on material that's already copyrighted, who owns the copyright for that new analysis?
Wow.
The AI company, the people who wrote the original stuff.
This is crazy. That's why I love doing these deep dives.
Yeah.
We start with what seems like a simple copyright case, and then boom,
Right.
we're suddenly talking about like the future of authorship. What even is creativity anymore?
Yeah, it really shows you just how fast AI is changing things,
Right.
and we're just starting to see the effects.
Totally. And speaking of effects, this whole case with Perplexity,
Yeah.
it makes you think, where do we even draw the line between inspiration and stealing in this whole AI world?
Yeah.
Like, at what point does an AI go from using information to learn to just ripping someone off?
It's the big question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's something that courts and lawmakers are going to be debating for years to come. This case with the New York Times and Perplexity, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and what happens if certain websites and publications just say, nope, AI is banned?
Right.
Will we be stuck with AI summaries that are based on like just a tiny bit of information?
Right.
What does that even mean for the quality of the information that we see? It's like we're on the edge of this huge information revolution,
Yeah.
but we still don't even know the rules.
We're writing the rules as we go.
Totally.
And it's a conversation that everyone needs to be a part of.
Right.
Because AI is only going to get more advanced. All these questions about copyright and fair use and even what it means to be creative, they're not going away.
No.
If anything, they're going to get more complicated.
So everyone listening, the next time you're reading an AI summary, just take a second. Think about where that information actually came from. Think about the authors, the legal stuff, the ethics of it all.
Yeah.
Because this is the future of how we understand the world. It's a brave new world out there.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to not screw it up.